folks. It's Thursday, the 6th of February. Middle of a ghost town here. 1.3 million people all hiding. It's dire here. It's very dire. There's people dropping on the footpath, literally. I can't wait to get out of here. It's terrible.
A city of 11 million people in lockdown.
So here I am sitting at home because after returning from Hubei province at the heart of the coronavirus outbreak, everybody's told you need to go into quarantine. You can't be exposed to others for several weeks.
More than 2,000 dead, tens of thousands infected. Rising anger over how the crisis is being handled.
Local officials in Wuhan did withhold information. The doctors in Wuhan who were talking about it were explicitly told to shut up.
And scientists racing to find a vaccine.
We just don't know how this outbreak is going to develop or how many people are ultimately going to be infected or ultimately going to die from this disease.
Tonight on Four Corners, how the coronavirus outbreak sparked a global emergency.
I'm absolutely fucking petrified. The police are actually knocking on doors and taking temperatures, and if people have got a temperature, they're dragging them out. You don't get a fucking say in it. You don't get an option.
Wuhan is a very, very beautiful, charming and bustling city in central China. It sits on the banks of Yangtze River. It's a mega city. Wuhan is also home to the second most number of universities in China. People around the world come to Wuhan to study.
It's right in the heart of the country, geographically as well as economically. All these trains and planes are coming through there, and to have the virus outbreak start there, it's almost like if you wanted to pick the worst place for it to break out in, that would be the place you'd release it.
In early December, people in Wuhan begin falling ill with a mystery virus.
The first infections in Wuhan started in early December, and I believe the first case in December the 1st. When a new infectious disease appears, it does take a little time to register and become aware that it's new. So there were people presenting with a form of pneumonia.
Local doctors suspect the virus originated in the city's seafood and wildlife market.
So we think the virus probably originated from bats because that's what the genetic data tell us, but often there's an intermediary animal host. In this case, they think pangolins might be implicated, which are a mammal, and that intermediary animal host might have been at the markets. We don't think that it's from eating those things specifically, like through the gastrointestinal tract, but more from handling them, from touching the contaminated meat. So somewhere in that market, we believe there must have been a contaminated animal source that infected the first cluster of humans.
In late December, as the number of cases increases, doctors in Wuhan begin sharing information in a private chat group.
Well before any of us knew about the coronavirus, there were people who tried to sound the alarm. So there were a group of whistleblowers who'd heard that there was this virus cluster, and they started speaking about it. Now, in particular, there was one doctor, Li Wenliang. He posted on a chat group with his former university classmates. The people had been coming in with what he thought was the SARS virus.
7 SARS cases were confirmed in the Huanan seafood market. The main mode of transmission of the virus is droplet transmission at close range or contact with respiratory secretions of patients. This can cause a special pneumonia that is evidently contagious and capable of affecting multiple organ systems. It is also called SARS. The patients were isolated in the emergency department of a hospital. Everyone, please be careful. That's scary. SARS is back.
The outbreak revived the spectre of SARS, another type of coronavirus, which killed 774 people in 2002 and 2003.
The reason why they would have been so concerned at the prospect that this was SARS was threefold. First of all, SARS was super infectious. Second, it had a relatively high mortality rate of 10%. And third, a large number of healthcare workers were actually died from SARS because of the complexity with stopping transmission. And I think that was the real concern.
On the same day as Dr. Lee's warning, the Wuhan Health Commission sends an urgent internal notice to hospitals on the treatment of pneumonia of unknown cause.
Some medical institutions in our city have seen patients steadily with pneumonia of unknown cause. If you find patients with unexplained pneumonia, actively adjust the resources and treat them on the spot.
The notice warns them to keep the outbreak quiet.
Without authorization, no units or individuals shall release treatment-related information to the outside.
当局出于政治的考量，来向公众隐瞒。当然，我们并不怀疑他实际上同时在向中央如实汇报的情况。所以，地方政府在这个时候，他们是不向地方民众负责，完全是向中央负责，而采取一个所谓内紧外松的政策。外松指的是向公众向。
Dr. Lee and the other doctors continued to share information.
Be careful. The WeChat group of our class has been banned. The latest news is the coronavirus infection has been confirmed, and virus classification is in progress. Please don't spread the word and ask your family and loved ones to take precautions.
Do not go to the Huanan seafood market in the near future.
So when this group of doctors, I think they were university classmates from Wuhan, began sharing the information they had about a strange new virus on this sort of joint WeChat group, they were doing what you'd expect medical professions to do, to try and sort of pool information and see what was actually happening. But of course, that's a kind of dangerous thing to do in China. I think there's little doubt right now that local officials in Wuhan did withhold information. They've admitted as much. The doctors in Wuhan who were talking about it were explicitly told to shut up.
Dr. Lee and his colleagues are hauled in for questioning by Wuhan police.
After investigation and verification by the public security organs, 8 offenders have been summoned and handled according to law. The police will investigate and punish with zero tolerance those illegal acts that fabricate and spread rumors and disrupt social order.
Dr. Lee was disciplined by his own hospital. He was even picked up by the police and taken in and castigated and told not to spread rumours. This is what happens when you are saying things publicly that the Communist Party doesn't like. You're spreading rumours. Even if somebody is trying to tell the world about a potentially dangerous virus, the first instinct is to shut them up.
Despite the risk of retribution, critics like Dr. Wu Chang, who already lost his university job for defying a ban by President Xi on teaching democracy, continue to speak out over the government's handling of the crisis.
我们看到，在武汉肺炎新冠病毒发作成为危机的1个多月以来，1月20号作为分水岭，政府和中央政府的反应似乎。
That's the key point in this saga. You know, they lost about 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, just when the virus was at its sort of nascent point, just at a time where they could have traced it, just at a time where perhaps they could have checked it more substantially. But that was lost because it got caught up in the politics of the information flow and information surveillance in China.
4 weeks after the first infections, China notifies the World Health Organization of the outbreak. Things are about to get worse. In early January, millions of Chinese are preparing to travel to and from Wuhan to celebrate Chinese New Year with their families.
If you were to pick the most dangerous time, the worst time for a virus to break out here, the worst time for it to spread quickly across China and even around the world, it would be the Lunar New Year. You have hundreds of millions of people crisscrossing China, traveling overseas, and because of that mass migration, the largest mass migration annually in the world, I mean, it was just a terrible time for this virus outbreak to happen.
Australian resident Ying Wang, who lives in Melbourne, is preparing to visit Wuhan with her husband and 2 children when she hears about the outbreak.
It was a couple of days after our Christmas holiday in Melbourne. I got a video sent over from my cousin in Wuhan, and according to the video, there was suspected SARS-like pneumonia. And I asked my cousin, should I cancel my trip? We waited until probably the first week in January. And then there was an official announcement from our local government back in Wuhan saying that the disease was controllable. And then it sort of, I feel relieved. So we went out. We went out with our trip.
Ying Wang and her family arrive in Wuhan on January 9. That same day, a 61-year-old man who had visited the seafood market becomes the first person to die of coronavirus. His death is kept quiet for 2 days.
我们看到，在疫情扩散的最关键的1月初，武汉和湖北地方是正在召开两会。所以我们看到第一例的死亡消息到9号死亡，到11号才报，然后在11号之后就出现了一个病例和死亡增加的平台期，没有任何变化。我相信是地方当局出于政治的考量，来向公众隐瞒。
On January 22, the government finally acknowledges the gravity of the situation at a press conference in Beijing.
病毒存在变异的可能，疫情存在着进一步扩大的风险。当前，政治春运、人员流动性激增，客观上加大了疫情传播的风险和防控的难度，绝不能掉以轻心，要高度警惕。
9 people have died and 440 people are confirmed to have contracted a mysterious coronavirus as China works to stop it spreading during the Lunar New Year travel rush.
It was 22nd of January. That was the turning point. It was Wednesday, and just bad news started coming in. It started with the Chinese official news saying that it's getting much worse than they expected. And then all of a sudden, I think it was the next day, 23rd, I remember, I woke up quite late, like 10 a.m. And suddenly, my dad just told me, oh, we can't go out now. We can't go out. We can't get out of our apartment.
There's been a dramatic development this morning in the Chinese city of Wuhan, which is the epicenter of an outbreak of a deadly new virus. All public transport, buses, trains, ferries and the airport have been shut down as authorities scramble to contain the spread of the coronavirus.
I mean, when the authorities decided to lock down that whole province of Hubei, that's like locking down the entire population of Italy and telling them you can't leave that province. It was really the moment when everybody knew, all right, this is a big problem.
When Wuhan went into lockdown, I think January the 23rd, and then flights and greater lockdown measures across China, this is unprecedented in the history of modern medicine. We've never tried, we know that containment can work, but it's never really been done at this large scale.
The day I learned that Wuhan was in lockdown, I felt quite shocked, and I immediately started worrying about food supply, and I had to stop everything on a day, just started messaging everybody to find out, is that really the official news? How serious is this announcement?
By late January, Wuhan's hospitals are struggling to cope. And medical staff are under intolerable pressure. With patient numbers surging, construction begins on 2 new hospitals, with one scheduled to open in just over a week.
Even though Chinese authorities have effectively shut down several cities, the World Health Organization says it's not yet a global health emergency.
So obviously the whole world was watching very closely through January as this epidemic unfolded, and people were very concerned. A lot of experts were concerned and felt that the public health emergency of international concern should have been declared earlier. I think people were harking back to Ebola and what happened there, and they were afraid of delays that might have been very costly in terms of the ability to save people's lives.
Australia's first case of coronavirus has been confirmed in Victoria as New South Wales announces it has 2 probable cases.
So the minute we made the diagnosis of the first case in Australia, we knew how significant that was, and we knew that we wanted to culture the virus.
In a major breakthrough, Australian scientists become the first outside China to isolate the virus in a laboratory.
It's definitely growing. It started at 30, so that's 3 logs, so 1,000 times stronger.
Awesome.
So it's definitely growing.
So we've got it. Fantastic.
Yeah.
CSIRO scientists begin growing the virus in their highest security laboratory, reserved for the most deadly pathogens.
We don't actually know how dangerous this virus is. We know it kills people, but we don't know how many, and we don't know exactly what the mechanism is by which this virus kills people. So at the moment we're taking the highest level of precautions.
our staff can only usually work about 4 hours in those suits and in those conditions, because it's very stressful to imagine you're actually working with such high volatile agents.
The most important thing that we're doing at the moment is growing the virus to produce more of it so that we can understand more about the characteristics of this virus and also how it behaves in our biological model so that we can see the progress of the disease.
So we will then introduce the virus into our test animals, on this occasion ferrets, because their respiratory system is very similar to humans. And the idea here is to understand how that infection progresses and how it behaves. This is very important for us to understand, because if we can't understand how the infection progresses and in which way it progresses, we can't understand how vaccines work.
In China, the escalating number of infections prompts a rare outburst of anger online against authorities.
我请问一下，他妈的，这个地球上还能找出第二个国家，是这么扯淡吗？你整个地球还能找出第二个国家，第二个政府像这个样子搞吗？现在的武汉市就他妈的跟地狱一样，看到他们倒地死亡，或者说各种情况。 那些悲剧，今天是大年初一啊，本来是一个非常高兴喜气的日子，这个时间段，但是眼下你觉得我们武汉人民或者说一个中国人能高兴得起来吗？
在这次武汉肺炎过程当中，中国网民实际上是有9亿多的智能手机所组成的近乎全部的中国公民，他们。 对武汉肺炎1个多月以来的状况是极其不满，而且这种不满，据我观察，在过去8年来是前所未有的。他们对武汉地方政府在防疫救灾当中的不力，对武汉人民在封城之后所陷入的困境，当地的医疗的瘫痪，他们所面。
As authorities desperately try to stop the virus spreading, Wuhan is effectively cut off from the rest of China.
We decided to go into Hubei province to have a look what it was like right inside the virus hot zone. As we got closer and closer to Hubei, the roadblocks were becoming more serious. And in fact, it looked like something out of an apocalyptic movie. The police are making all the cars pull over to the side.
So basically, that's the border that way. The police have told us that we can drive in, but we can't drive out.
We drove through a series of ghost towns. I mean, nobody on the streets, shops closed, the shutters were down. And this is during Spring Festival. Normally, this is a time when you'd have fireworks, families, friends gathering to have meals together, celebrating, being happy, and instead it was completely dead and in fact pretty eerie.
The outbreak of the coronavirus in China has finally been declared a global health emergency after a rapid escalation in the number of infections during the past week. There are almost 8,000 cases in 18 countries, including 9 in Australia.
So here I am sitting at home and reporting from where I live. That's because after returning from Hubei province at the heart of the coronavirus outbreak, everybody's told you need to go into quarantine. You can't be exposed to others for several weeks. this city, Beijing, if I look out the window, it's dead. I mean, there are hardly any people in the streets. Friends here don't want to go outdoors. That's because they're afraid of catching the coronavirus. And the same is happening all over the country, all these mega cities in China.
The government is taking drastic action to stem the coronavirus. Foreign nationals coming from China are now banned from entering the country.
I think from a disease control point of view, we want to continue these for as long as is feasible. There's just so many major economic consequences of the travel ban that I think at some point we'll have to make the decision to lift the bans. But if we can keep them going as long as possible, that will be beneficial from a disease control point of view.
Hundreds of Australians remain trapped in Hubei province.
So this is a view from my window, and it's been really good weather today, but we're not going out. And this is our central garden at level 6. So it's a bit shame that we're stuck at home. Otherwise, it could be a really good day out. I really just want a more firm answer from anywhere, really, from WHO or my local government. So how bad really is? I'm still having this question. How serious is this whole pandemic? Even though every day we watch the numbers, infected number of people, also the death toll keep going up. Just, yeah, I need to, I don't know. I need somebody to assure me this is, I don't know, I feel like the end of the world.
Morning, folks. It's Thursday, the 6th of February. Middle of a ghost town here. 1.3 million people all hiding. It's raining. It's a miserable day. Death toll was like 545 today. 16,800 odd people in hospital in my district. Waiting on DFAT to give us an answer about when I can get out of here.
Australian Tim McLean is stranded on the outskirts of Wuhan. He's trying to get his Chinese partner a visa to come to Australia.
Foreign Affairs just contacted me. I just hung up the phone. They just confirmed and wanted to let me know that my spouse, Xu Shong, didn't make the list for the flight with Qantas, and asked me if I was still interested in leaving. I informed them that I'm not leaving without her. It's dire here. It's very dire. There's queues outside the hospitals now. We're not allowed near them. There's people dropping on the footpath, literally. Okay? I know how bad it is. I can't wait to get out of here. It's terrible. So this has been spraying right outside our front door. We've been doing this all through the city regularly. The local council have been going out and spraying disinfectant around everybody's doorways. So I suspect they're spraying to stop infections coming out of the sewer. I better go in and shut the door. I've seen medical folks turn up 2 doors away from me, 20 metres from my front door, and take a lady away that was infected. They also took a son. The son returned home. 24 hours later, he was okay. We haven't seen or heard of the lady since.
So people have been concerned about the human rights aspects of quarantine and isolation of cases, quarantine of contacts, etc., and that's been happening on a very large scale in China, but also in Australia and other countries. From a disease control point of view, putting aside other issues, from a disease control point of view, it works.
Videos emerge on social media of authorities using increasingly drastic measures.
强行啊，一家4口啊。不是不用去谈，不用谈。
Around China, residents post scenes claiming officials are welding the doors of apartment buildings shut so people can't get out.
哎，那个是门吗？才敢那门哦，把门封的了。你看那个电焊，那个电焊工在那块焊的，那中间是一个门，你看，可怕。
把门洞都焊死了，不让出屋了。下一个就是我们6号楼了，这是我家了。
I'm very concerned about getting this virus. I'm not even 100 metres away from one of the hospitals. It's full. I've seen people entering that hospital. I've seen people getting rolled out on stretchers out of that hospital. It's literally across the road from where I come out of my apartment. Now, that's concerning. My hospitals here are full. We've run out of medical supplies here. There's no PPE or personal protective equipment available anymore, so the doctors are all gone to the bigger hospitals. They're shipping our sick and our, the people that are in bad condition, they're taking them to Wuhan. The Wuhan hospitals are also full now.
By early February, the virus is in 25 countries, with 216 cases outside China.
The most likely way that the virus is travelling outside of China is by infected people. So these people, they are perhaps in the early stages of the disease and perhaps not showing very many clinical signs. So they are able to get onto planes and they're quite happy to travel. And in all innocence, they are spreading the disease as they travel.
We think probably 10% or less of all infections in China are being detected at the current time. We estimate that maybe up to 50,000 new infections a day occurring in China, which is obviously much larger than the official case numbers.
Almost 4,000 passengers, including more than 200 Australians, have spent their first 24 hours officially in quarantine on board a cruise ship off Japan. They'll be isolated on board for the next fortnight, with some passengers growing anxious as their crucial medicines are beginning to run out.
We know that cruise ships are at high risk for outbreaks. It's well documented that you get outbreaks of influenza, norovirus, gastro, and so on cruise ships. They are closed, small communities in a small space compared to, say, a country. So obviously you can get more intense transmission once an outbreak starts.
Shocking news breaks that the man who had first warned of the outbreak has died of coronavirus.
In China, censors are working overtime to contain an outpouring of anger and grief over the death of the doctor who blew the whistle on the coronavirus crisis. Li Wenliang died from the virus in a Wuhan hospital 5 weeks after being punished by authorities for warning others of a dangerous new virus.
There was a huge outpouring of grief, anger, frustration on Chinese social media, and not just from so-called netizens, you know, on Chinese-style Reddit forums or something, but from the Supreme Court of China, who put out a statement saying that, you know, these doctors were heroes, they should have been allowed to do their job.
从知识分子到公众都从中意识到，李医生代表的是中国的良心，这个良心相当于2003年 SARS 危机当中蒋延勇医生的良心。他从一开始，被隐瞒、被压制，他所说出的真相，本来是可以挽救数万人的这个。
The death toll reaches a critical milestone, overtaking the numbers killed by SARS.
Three具尸体已经在这里躺了一个上午了，有的人已经是凌晨死的，到现在没有人来处理。然后医生、护士还有病人全部都在这种环境下面工作。
After being conspicuously absent, President Xi emerges on state media to assert his authority.
菜价怎么样？菜价还行的，还行，非常时期就不握手了。但是咱们呢，但是你一定要有信心。
She has really lost control of the narrative, and he's struggling to get it back. Now, if that goes on, if they don't get on top of the virus, then that can really damage Xi's image, I think, even with ordinary Chinese people, and that has potentially profound implications because 2-3 years down the track, when he's meant to be reappointed, maybe his enemies will use this against him.
所以他们将这种不满指向了习本人，指向了习的这个治理主义路线本身，这个是习近平，我相信对他最严重的威胁，因为他的执政基础很大程度上是建立在一个民粹的基础上，那么这种民粹基础的丧失，毫无疑问会动摇他在党内的地位。
Australians still trapped in the coronavirus epicenter in China are tonight preparing for a second attempt at an evacuation flight to Darwin.
There is a seat available for my partner Sean and myself on the next available flight out of Wuhan, which apparently is leaving at midnight tonight. We've got 3 or 4 hours to get to the airport. They've sent us all our passes, etc., so we can get through the checkpoints. It's all confirmed. We've got the emails, we've got the thumbs up, so we're out of here. We're heading home. Can't wait, and super excited.
Today is our last day in Wuhan. It's been pretty long journey, really. In the past 2 weeks, more than 2 weeks, we've been house quarantined for more than 2 weeks. So tomorrow we're going to get out and go to the airport and come back to Australia. So it's still unreal for me.
reaching the airport toll gate, so it looks like we're going through a checkpoint. It's 2:30, kids are not asleep. I'm super tired. We're still waiting, about half of the plane, still waiting to be cleared of security and passport control and stuff. A lot of paperwork, a lot of screening, a lot of questions. It's just very, very stressful, really.
We're out of here.
Yes, we're out of here. Going home.
Tim McLean isn't on the flight. Quarantine restrictions mean he hasn't been able to get any transport to the airport, so he's still stuck in Hubei province.
I'm absolutely fucking petrified now. 1,300 odd people are dead here. The police are actually knocking on doors and taking temperatures, and if people have got a temperature, they're dragging them out, mate. You don't get a fucking say in it. You don't get an option. You get taken away and put with a bunch of other sick people. Not only are we in quarantine, but it's beyond quarantine now. I don't even know what to call it. It's quite terrifying knowing that people can knock on your door here and just drag you out for no reason at all because you've got a temperature.
At the moment, we don't have a good understanding of the real mortality rate for the novel coronavirus. It's estimated about 2%. So if the mortality rate's 2%, if it's 1%, even if it's 0.5%, and 300 million people get infected, that's a lot of people that could potentially die. Because if you think back into the Spanish flu, enormous numbers of people died, but the actual mortality rate was less than 1%, but a huge number of people were infected.
The World Health Organization is this morning warning the coronavirus could pose a greater global threat than terrorism.
A virus can have more powerful consequences than any terrorist action. And that's true. And if the world doesn't want to wake up and consider this enemy virus as public enemy number one, I don't think we will learn from our lessons.
We just don't know how this outbreak is going to develop, or how many people are ultimately going to be infected or ultimately going to die from this disease. We don't yet know exactly how the virus is evolving. We don't know how many people are actually infected that are not revealed to be infected, and we don't know how many people are dying that are misdiagnosed as dying from other disease. So this is a real problem for us to be able to make any real prediction or to model the spread of this disease.
I think the worst case scenario is that we are unable to contain the virus, that we see sustained human-to-human transmission in many parts of the world.
The World Health Organization says the window of opportunity to contain the coronavirus outbreak is narrowing. The statement comes as concerns grow in South Korea and the Middle East about the number of cases. There have also been more cases confirmed among Australians evacuated from a cruise ship in Japan.
future's going to bring. We've got no information about how long we're going to be in here. There's no indication whatsoever. I've got sick people living next door to me. I've got sick people above me. I've got sick people across the lane from me. Some of those people have got chains on their doors so people can't access them because they're ill. I'm hiding from a virus that you can't see and a government that you don't want to muck around with.